brought to you almost live from the Dude in the Basement Studios. Why? Because that's where the good stuff is. It's Sips, Suds, and Smokes with your smoking hosts, the good old boys. Suds. It's time for more Suds.
Hello and welcome to this Sud segment here on Sip, Suds, and Smokes. I'm good old boy Mike, and we're here today listening about the Sud segment, and we're talking about everything good in life that is worth discussing here on this particular Sud segment. I have a lot of regular hosts here joining me for this segment. We have good old gal Julieanna.
Hi, everyone.
Good old boy Dave.
Hello.
Reverend Mark.
Hello.
Good old boy John.
Hello.
We'll take the barley wine away from Reverend Mark right now, straight up front. So our side segments, if you don't know about them, are all about beer, and more beer, and British accents from Reverend Mark. So this segment today is all about barley wine. This is actually one of our style shows. We don't have a lot of these because they're not like 30 styles of beer, to go through. And this is we have some other style episodes if you want to go back and check them. We've done one on porter beers. We've done another one on stout beers, and this is on barley wine. And I really have to thank good old boy Dave for coming up with the idea for this show. I think that he and I had both amassed more barley wine than we could possibly imagine to drink alone, and it was definitely time to sit down. So, Dave, tell us all about what we're going to do today.
Well, we'll be tasting and discussing these beers and rating them with our beer ratings plus our signature belch sounds. Here are those ratings now. A 1... That sucks. Give me anything but a bud. 2, was that a belch?
I think it was an English belch there.
Radio. 3, what a relief. And 4, a body should really not make that sound.
And number 5
is listen to that hang time. Give me another.
Listen to the hang time. I want to turn the page so I can keep the 5 words.
Let's put all of these on the same page next time.
I'll work hard on it, as well as my British accent. Well, maybe I should flip in a British accent to discuss the fact that we're talking about barley wine here. This is an English thing here, and I was thinking about the theme songs to charge into here, and it's just, frankly, there's no really good songs to talk about barley wine, and I just couldn't remind me of anything that was English that was really worthy of talking about barley wine. All I had was cannonballs playing through my head. I had, the theme song of Braveheart playing through my head, the whole time. So I just really couldn't think of anything. Frankly, the only thing I could really think of was, this Monty Python clip that I thought was apropos of exactly what we're talking about today.
I'm French! Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
Dave, please help. Save us. Tell us all about barley wine.
Well, according to Garrett Oliver, the brewmaster at Brooklyn Brewery in New York, barley wines were actually the English aristocracy's shot at the French aristocracy. If they couldn't get...
Which finger is that?
I think it's the middle one. If they couldn't get the best wines to serve at their table, they wanted to have really great ales and really strong ones that would serve the same purpose. So for the longest time, only they could get those really big, malty, strong beers that would, basically put your head down at the end of the meal and go to sleep kind of beers.
Probably good for the women in the room.
Yes. It wasn't really... wow. Anyway, it wasn't really around till the beginning of the 20th century that Bass and Company in England did their barley wine #1. And even now today in England, even though that's where the style really began, it's still not quite as popular. It's well known, but it's still not something that's a big go-to for most English beer drinkers. Now, here on the other side of the big pond, over the last 20 years, we've really started embracing that style, and it really comes from the whole mindset of Americans who we want it bigger, better, stronger. Everything we do is, let's ramp it up a little bit. So over the last 20 years, people who go from double IPAs and imperial stouts and things, we've started moving into the barley wine realm. Now, if you're the kind of guy who likes to come home on a Friday afternoon and pop open a 6-pack of Bud Light,
this is not
going to get it done. If you do manage to get one down and keep it down, it'll put you out. That's for sure. But it's really not the way that we want to introduce people into craft beer. This is advanced drinking. So let's.
I'm trying to think. Where do I put that on my resume?
Yeah,
advanced drinker.
Well, I have it.
Producer, host, advanced drinker.
Yeah, it's at the top of mine. Which
proficient in office.
Yes,
advanced drinker.
Is it a skill or an objective?
I've learned.
I don't know.
I'm really working towards. My left hand is. Yeah. I think I'm finally getting it in there just right. My right hand. I'm okay. Yeah. I'm good putting anything in that right hand. My left hand. I need to work on it. I'm pretty good. I'm a bomber. A full imperial stout. I don't know. My left hand, the right hand, I'm okay.
Well, until you can claim that you're a double fister, you're not really ready. Okay.
Oh, man, I knew I could work my way up to something.
So there are a couple of different varieties. Now, when we talk about beer styles and we talk about the BJCP, there are a couple of different styles of barley wine, and I'm going to let the man who I know who knows more about beer. He's not even looking. Who knows more about beer than anyone I know?
I'm looking at this guy.
Reverend Mark's going to tell us about the different styles of barley wine.
Okay, well, I'm flattered and I'm humbled and I'm challenged by that. According to the Beer Judge Certification Program, which is the beer descriptions,
a bunch of boring guys that don't drink enough beer.
They drink too much,
and we just get extremely anal and verbose about what distinguishes one particular style from another. And the subcategories just keep growing and growing and growing. Essentially, under the Beer Judge Certification sort of schema, there are 3 different sort of subcategories: the Old Ale, the English barley wine, and the American barley wine. It all goes back really to the Old Ale, in that if you think back far enough, when beers were being brewed several hundred years back, at least in Europe, that for one thing, grains back then, barley in particular, was under-modified, and the efficiencies that were produced in mashes were relatively low compared to what we get today. And so the bigger the beer, the more you would have a preponderance of dextrinous sugar, that is unfermentable sugar. And so when you made a big beer, meaning that a beer that started out with just a lot of sugar overall and a higher percentage of unfermentable sugar, then you wound up with an alcoholic beer that was still fairly sweet. And so the Old Ale improved with age and still does. And so, we kind of start out, that's the first of the 3 subcategories under barley wine. It is, of course, the traditional English strong ale. It is seldom, if ever, released until it has been aged a while. Of course, have been discussing on other shows barrel aged beers, but this is not so much that as that it's just bulk aged. And of course, these days there's higher percentages of overall in terms of the base malts. They're well modified, but it seems as though as they continue to try to replicate this particular style and keep it true to sort of that historic period, that and this is one thing I like about still keeping this category intact as a hobby brewer and kind of a competitor, is that if you have like a barley wine that is aged even beyond its prime, you can just enter it in the old ale category. Because it's...
I'm sorry, Dave. Was that you were holding up your hand?
I call mine old socks.
Socks.
Yeah.
You know, all of the various, sorts of taste discrepancies that we find with beers, all flavors are embraced often with this style, such as oxidation. An old ale can be, can smell like wet cardboard, and still be okay.
There's a couple of beers here on the commercial examples that I like that are definitely catching my attention, and I think if any of our listeners have had these styles, there's Fuller's. There's a lot of style of Fuller's. The Samuel Smith's Winter Welcome, I know, is widely distributed as well, and I think that those are several, I think, good commercial examples on here. Avery Old Jubilation is probably the last one that's been added to this list, and I think certainly for folks that are on the West Coast that can get Avery, I think that's a good example of this. So then there's English barley wine.
Right. So the English barley wine is... it is different than the old ale somewhat. It still is an old English style ale that's high,
a different kind of
high in
sock.
gravity. Yeah, it's a different kind of sock. The aromatics are different. I think with the old ale, you're really looking, just for kind of caramel. It's very straightforward, very kind of one-dimensional, if you will. An English barley wine starts taking on layers of different kinds of flavors and aromatics, and so you get toffee, molasses, different kinds of things going on. Some of that comes from how long you do your boil. I know, like as a hobby brewer, when you're doing a barley wine, you typically will boil a barley wine for 2 hours and a half, and normally, when you're brewing just any other kind of beer, it's like an hour to an hour and a half. So what you're doing is that you're caramelizing, and you're reducing you're intensifying the sugar, and so that's part of how this beer has been brewed, both the English barley wine and then the
those
old ale.
defects aren't quite as acceptable when you get into the English barley wine style too.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So when you start getting those defects, then you just move it over into the old ale category. But yeah, it's not necessarily a hoppy beer, but it has more hops present than the old ale. It's the English style hops, though, Fuggles, Goldings, where you have more earth tones. I would say, what is it, the French term that they use for a lot for wine, terroir. You get that with these kinds of beers. I mean, it really does kind of replicate.
I can't use the word terroir and beer in the same sentence without busting laughing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. All of our wine listeners are checking out right about now. Man, I think I'm going to listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me again.
Mike's head almost exploded at that moment. Sorry.
But I'm very keen on trying to stay true to style with these beers. I'm not so sure why. We're finding as well. I do know why, but I'm as a beer drinker. I tend to want, if I want an English ale, I want it to be very true in terms of its it's what it's presenting to my palate, and I think that the English hops and even just European noble hops are less assertive, and it's just they add a little bit of spice, a little bit of bitter, but they're kind of always in the background.
Well, I like so one of the commercial examples here for this style is actually one of the beers in our lineup today, which is North Coast Old Stock Ale. And so that's one really great example. And I think something that a lot of people can get a hold of. Another beer that's a commercial example here is Weyerbacher Blithering Idiot. And if you haven't gone back and actually listened to our Weyerbacher Brewery Takeover, that was one of the beers that we had in that show as well, to help you understand that there's definitely some difference between American barley wine and English barley wines here. So there's that's what's right up next, which is American barley wine, and that's what a lot of folks in the U.S. are going to have access to, a lot of this style, right?
Right, and because we're of course in the 21st century now, and there's just there's a rapid turnover in the market just overall. I would say that we're the American style barley wine, and I said this in an earlier show, sort of the line that distinguishes the American style barley wine from the Imperial IPA is sometimes really thin, and we can get into that a little later. There's some of the barley wines we've tried today that I think could easily kind of nudge in that direction. One in particular that we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think also because the American barley wine puts more emphasis on American style hops. Also, if you use American malts rather than the English style malts, you're going to get a different kind of malt profile in your beer too. And so it's a cleaner malt, more attenuating, and then you get more hop assertiveness, and that means you don't have to really age these beers. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't, because you're going to kind of lose, all the dimensionality of those different boiling, the bittering, the aroma, and the flavoring hops that go into, the American style barley wine. So I think that's to our advantage too. I mean, we're living in an era of, where we're transporting things quickly and easily, and everything is refrigerated, and so we can turn our products over a lot quicker now, and there's still a place for the old beers that can age a while and be appreciated for what they are, but you're appealing to a very different sense of what this taste should be. So.
Well, and I think most of what I think about with the American barley wine styles is it being very hop forward. And part of that is just the availability of the hop varieties, here in the U.S. are very different than the ability for those English barley wine styles, where I won't say that it's hop forward, but it's just very different in terms of the style of the bitterness that you would have in an American barley wine.
Even the hop flavor is different than an American, because the American hops tend to be much more citrusy and fruity versus the earthiness of like the traditional English hops.
Well, we have some good commercial examples of this. Actually, in our lineup for today, we actually have Sierra Nevada Bigfoot as well as Stone Old Guardian in this lineup that we went through today for American barley wine. So we'll actually get to beers in all three of these categories as we go along. So we usually take style tasting like barley wine, and we do it in a blind taste testing, mainly because we're usually tasting some very similar or like things, and blind tastings are incredibly, worthy of doing and keep you incredibly honest. Well, we decided to do this particular style very different because it's a little too broad because of these three different styles of barley wines to really take in a blind taste testing, and so we decided to taste these straight up. So, each of us has selected our top three beers from the following beers today. We have quite a few to go through, and we won't probably talk about all these today, so be patient with me as I go through this list. There's Sierra Nevada Barrel-Aged Bigfoot from 2012, Old Hickory's Peabody Blendiculous Series, the Duck-Rabbit Barleywine, 21st Amendment's Lower DeBoom Barleywine, Stone's Old Guardian from 2013, Anchor's Old Foghorn Ale, Sweetwater 16 So Fine Red Wheat Wine Ale, Mikkeller's Big Wurst Barleywine, Schlafly's Reserve Barleywine Style Ale aged in oak, and this was the 2012. This is the 2011.
Yeah.
All right, we had two, so then we wound up with the 2011 in the tasting. That's right.
Yeah.
We went with the older one. Then there is BFM, Terrapin Spike and Drum Cuvée. It's a collaboration ale, barley wine as well. Pretty Things, Old Funnest Regards. Hang on, we're halfway through the list. Green Flash Barley Wine. Straight to Ale, it's a collaboration with Blue Pants, Yellowhammer, and it's from their Liberation Series, number 3, which is their barley wine. Alaskan Pilot Series, Barley Wine Ale. North Coast Old Stock, it's the 2006 vintage. And Bigfoot, Nevada, Bigfoot, wow. Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, and this is the 2003 that we went through. We had a couple of those as well from some earlier vintages. Long list. We'll post this on Facebook so you can see the entire list, because we probably won't talk about all these beers through our discussion. So we'll go through each of these beers in a round table with each of our hosts, and as each of us has maybe picked one of these beers in our same list, we'll chime in as well. We'll still be rating our beers according to our Suds rating as we go along. Up first is going to be Julieanna with her top 3 beers of these barley wines.
First of all, I want to say that this was such a great selection to choose from today, because we didn't have just traditional barley wines. We had some very interesting barley wines, which helped me kind of clue myself into what I really enjoy and don't enjoy, if that makes any sense. That being said, the first one in my top 3 is Old Hickory's Peabody's Blendiculous series. Yeah, say that 10 times fast, even when you haven't had any barley wines beforehand. So, a little history about this particular barley wine is that it is a blend of several vintages that have been aged in bourbon barrels and then blended back in together for a very interesting layering effect. And okay, if anyone has been listening to me, in the past few episodes, I'm a girl that loves scotch and I'm a girl that loves whiskey. And anything that's barrel aged, pretty much I enjoy.
This is bourbon.
Okay.
And scotch and not whiskey.
Well, there's scotch whiskey, there's bourbon whiskey, Canadian whiskey. Anyways, I really enjoyed this. This was one of the things I really enjoy about barley wines is that it's very smooth, it's very complex, and it lingers on the tongue afterwards. This is one of those that did it for me. And I do get a bit of oakiness and a vanilla, which enhances, what I believe enhances a lot of the flavors that you get in a barley wine. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. That being said, I've given this one a 4.
Wow, how about that right off the bat? What else caught your eye?
The second one that drew my attention is from Pretty Things. It's called Our Finest Regards. I have a love for Pretty Things in general, and it's not just because of this particular style. I've had a few of their others, and I really enjoy it. But a little history about Pretty Things is that they're a brewery, but they're a renegade brewery in the sense of they don't have their own brewery. They brew they contract brew with others, which is a novel approach, but you see it popping up more and more these days. Another big one that is pretty popular is Stillwater Artisanal Ales from Delaware. They're an amazing brewery, but they go elsewhere to brew, and they collaborate a lot. That being said, this is a very English-style barley wine, and I'm in love with the roastiness character and the malts that Dan used in this particular barley wine. Dan himself, one of the brewers and co-founders of Pretty Things, he spent a lot of time in England, and you can tell with a lot of the beers that come out of Pretty Things, it's very English-based, and I'm totally in love with this one for different reasons. This is very malty, very grainy. I'm tasting a lot of coffee as well as those fruit flavors, and it gives me a new approach to a barley wine. That being said, this is another 4.
Wow. How about that? She likes the barley wine.
I think I do a little.
You like those two for sure.
Now, the last one in my top 3 is from Alaskan Brewing Company. It's their Pilot Series Barleywine Ale. This one was sweet where it needed to be. It lingered on the tongue. It was very ripe fruit flavors with a good blend of maltiness. It was a good balance between the both. And this is something that Dave and I have had in our possession now for 2 years, and have been waiting for a good time to get. And yeah, this is something that I actually had to put in a lot of effort to get.
I would say anything from Alaska, you have to put in a lot of effort to get.
True that.
But to me, totally well worth it. Totally well worth it. And this one, again, I've given a 4.
Wow, how about that? 4s all the way around. So those are 3 really great beers to start with here. So Dave, what's in your top 3?
Well, she actually stole some of my top 3, particularly the Old Hickory Blendiculous. Blendiculous.
Yep, that's
it's hard
right.
to say. The Blendiculous, for me, it reminds me of the Barton Baton from Dogfish Head.
Burton Baton,
thank you. And also the way that lambics are usually done by blending different vintages to get a smoother, more rounded flavor. That's what I tasted in this barley wine, was very smooth, very well-rounded, nice malty flavor that I couldn't drink a lot of it because of the ABV, but I could drink this beer consistently, and I really enjoyed it. I actually gave that beer a 5.
Wow.
My second beer, barley wine, is the 21st Amendment, Lower DeBoom.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it had a good balance. It had some bitterness and everything, but I'm not generally a 21st Amendment fan. Honestly, I've had a few of their beers, and by and large, I'm just not a fan. But this one, I thought it had a good balance. I thought it really was well-rounded and had good flavor, and I gave it a 4.
Wow.
And I could tell by some looks that other people gave it far different numbers.
Well,
but that's cool.
So I think the one conversation I liked about this beer, that John liked the packaging of this.
Yeah, I did. It's like in a Red Bull-sized can for the most part, which is perfect size for a barley wine to me. I don't tend to have like giant tastings where I have a ton of people over to be able to knock off a 22-ounce bomber. So if I'm going to buy barley wine, I would like to have it in reasonably sized containers, and this was like maybe a 6-ounce container, which is perfect for a barley wine,
because a lot of them come in 750s.
Exactly.
And it's like, unless you're having a barley wine party or something, you're going to have leftovers.
Sounds like an idea.
Yeah. Let's have a barley
Jot
wine
that
party.
down.
Yeah, barley wine party. I like it.
Wine party.
The third one for me is a little bit outside my box. Usually, it's the Green Flash barley wine.
Wow.
I'd mentioned in another show that I usually go, if there's an English versus American style choice, I'll go English most of the time. This Green Flash American barley wine, if you like IPAs, American IPAs and American double IPAs, this is a the barley wine for you. It's hoppy, it's balanced though, and it has a great flavor and aroma. I gave it a 4, and I think people could enjoy it.
Wow, there you have it. Those are 3 very different choices, and I like. Actually, our listeners don't know this, but we didn't actually talk to each other about what our top 3 picks were before we hopped here on the mic. So you're actually catching us reacting to each other as we've tasted a very long list and a very broad range of barley wines to go through. So, all right, next up is going to be Reverend Mark.
Well, I'm glad you made that observation, because nobody's going to believe what I have to say. With my top 3 selections, although my number 1 nobody's hit on yet, and I'll be interested to hear if it does come up at all. I gave my number 1 choice, 5 stars actually, to the North Coast Old Stock Ale. It totally wins. I think when you're drinking barley wine, for one thing, unlike most other beers, or at least many others, is that you really should not ask yourself, could I drink several of these? I mean, to me, a barley wine is just something that you have at the end of a day or as an aperitif, packaged, smaller volume. It is a wine strength beer, so you really, this is not a quaffable beer at all. So I'm not so sure that I would like this beer or a lot of these that we've sampled today if I was going to sit down and just, have a session. Although we've kind of done that, haven't we? But I like this in that it has a very rounded flavor profile. It's slightly malty. It's sweet, but not overly, and the sweetness is kind of a fig type of dark fruit. It suggests to me kind of an after-dinner aperitif kind of drink. And it kind of goes back to what I like about it is that it's kind of the best of both worlds, if you will. It's an American brewery, North Coast, which is also known for their prankster in the Old Rasputin. Mm-hmm. But they use the Maris Otter malt and the Fogel hops, and it's aged, and you can tell. So anyway, that's my favorite.
And your suds rating on that was 5?
Was a 5.
Oh, how about that? Right off the bat. So your number 2 pick is what?
My number 2 pick is Pretty Things.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of interesting that this is an American brewery out of Massachusetts, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and yet I think it's a very English style barley wine. It's not trying to be an American barley wine. It was one of the beers that I kept going back to, not necessarily because I just thought, wow, this is great at first, but it was like, this is really unique. It stands out. It's, like after a while we were drinking 16 different samples, and they were all kind of tasting the same. That particular beer just stood out every time, and it just so it really, to me at least, it again, it's kind of an old world English style beer. Wasn't oxidized. I mean, it wasn't. I wouldn't put it in an old ale category at all. But first time I ever had it, but it really lingered with me.
So what's your suds rating on that one?
I gave it a 4. Okay, and then number 3. Again, to your disclaimer.
Get ready, brace yourself.
My number 3 is the Alaskan Pilot Series.
Wow.
And I think this explains why, there are more aviation disasters per capita in Alaska than anywhere else.
Hitting that barley wine a little too much.
This was, to me, a very standalone style of barley wine. it kind of blended both the American and the English kind of characteristics. I really like what they do. Their smoked porter is just like one of the best beers going ever. And if you can get it fresh, of course, anything from Alaska, you're not easily going to get fresh.
Yeah, so I want to figure out a little bit of the story here around this. So this is a brewery I'm not familiar with Alaskan Ale. How do you find this? I mean, where do they distribute?
Okay. So
on the spot research.
I gotta know people who know people who have
There's a guy.
Okay, so I know there's a guy and a guy. Okay. So I go to St. Louis a lot. Love St. Louis. Love the beer in St. Louis. Yes, this is a plug for St. Louis. That being said, there's a particular place that I go to get my beer from in St. Louis. It's called the Wine and Cheese Place. Yes, I guess this is another plug. Anyways, the guys there are very particular and are experts on all sorts of beer that is available, as well as wine and cheese. So they're the ones that started turning me on to the craft beer movement, in the sense of things outside of the Tennessee, Georgia, Missouri area. And they keep talking about Alaskan Brewing Company. You gotta try their stuff, Well, then a few months later, I come back again for another visit, and they're like, hey, you're on Facebook, you need to try going to this particular blog. Okay, fine. I start going onto this blog, and it's this guy that works for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he starts talking about different breweries in the area, outside of the area, just things that are really good that appeal to him. Next thing you know, I'm hearing him talking about Alaskan Brewing Company. I'm like, well, darn, I got to try to find something from here at some point. So then I'm on Facebook one day, and I'm talking to this guy from England, no less, who travels a lot, and he happens to be a good friend. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to Alaska next week, and I'm going to be at Alaskan Brewing Company. Do you want me to, ask the brewer if he would be willing to talk to you? Yeah, sure, no worries. Thinking it won't happen. He'll be too inebriated from drinking so much that he won't remember. Well, darn it, the guy remembers. And so I start this conversation with him. Well, he happens to enjoy yeast and doing different yeast strains. Okay, so we're talking back and forth about yeast strains in beer. And, then we start talking about different beers. And I'm like, well, I'm hearing about this barley wine of yours that's really so good. Oh. How can I get one here in Tennessee?
So this is their go-to beer.
It's not their go-to, but he's particularly proud of this. Because he himself is from England, and he's a transplant. His wife was from Juneau. They met. He had to move out there, blah, blah, blah. So he sends me, he gives me the name of a guy that lives in Missouri, that frequents
Is there a direct
Alaska.
inbreeding part of this story?
Probably, and I'm just not aware of it. So anyways, I Facebook messaged the guy from St. Louis, ask him when he's going to Alaska. He tells me, okay, it's going to be in 4 months. Okay, so the next time I go to St. Louis, I meet up with him at a bar, give him some money, and say, hey, when you go to Alaska, can you bring me back a bottle?
We're all going, yeah.
You just paid for a mule.
I'm telling you, this is probably the most complicated beer story. Beer mule.
Good old boy John was not involved in this transaction in any way, shape, or form. Release myself of all.
Right. So then a few months later, I meet him at a restaurant, and lo and behold, he's like, I did you one better.
Was it behind a Denny's or an Applebee's? Yo, man, you got some beer.
Actually, no, I won't say
It was O'Charlie's.
I don't even think they have an O'Charlie's in St. Louis. But the point is that I met, the guy came back, and he gave me not that particular year, but he gave me something that was a couple years earlier that he actually got from the brewer, because me badgering the brewer about yeast information got me this batch of beer.
That is the wildest beer story I think I've heard.
So you guys should be really impressed.
I'm telling you.
You got to taste a
I'm
beer.
surprised this beer didn't come down from a satellite at this point. So.
Anyways, sadly, that's my story.
And gladly, several other people picked up on the remarkable, taste of this beer. Absolutely.
So, Reverend Mark, what is your beer? What is your rating? Such rating?
I give it a 4.
All right. Me, May, Mama, Moo. What planet are we on? All right, good old boy John. What's your top 3?
It's pretty simple. Everything that had all my top 3 have been spoken for at this point. All of these were to me completely different examples of the different styles. I have an American, I have an English, and I have an Old Ale. The one I enjoyed the most was the 21st Amendment's Lower DeBoom.
Wow.
I gave it a 4. And for me, it was very balanced. It didn't have any one thing that stood out over another. It wasn't overly sweet. It wasn't overly bitter. And it really was just nice, caramel notes and just a really good beer. And I keep going back to that one and drinking, sipping on that. And again, I was kind of drawn to it initially just because of the packaging. The packaging is perfectly sized for me as a barley wine drinker. Because I don't have to break out a 22 and figure out how to drink the whole thing over the course of a night. So I really enjoyed that. The second beer that I really enjoyed, and it's for the exact same reason that Julieanna and Reverend Mark enjoyed it, was Pretty Things, Our Finest Regards. And it was because of that different. It was a totally different flavor profile than any of the other beers we had, in a good way. That the one thing that me and Mark had even talked about when we had it, there's a coffee note in this beer that I at first I didn't know what I was tasting, and it to me it smelled and tasted like fresh ground coffee, and it was such a different, break from the other beers that we had.
Did it remind you kind of like a stout, like a really big stout in a way? A
little bit. If I closed my eyes and I didn't know I was drinking barley wine, that kind of thing, I would assume it's a stout initially. But it wasn't. It wasn't overly roasty, and it wasn't
stout.
And it wasn't overly roasty to where it was like bitter and harsh. But it was that nice, freshly ground coffee,
very poppy. Yeah,
and I gave that one a 4.
4 as well.
And the final beer I enjoyed was the 2006 North Coast Old Stock Ale. It was really, really nice. And I think it's, I don't know, I haven't had a fresh version of it, so I can't really say. But I like the age on that beer. It's very mellow, really sweet. You get, like, say, those old, like, dark fruits and that character that I really, really enjoyed. And I also gave it a 4.
Wow. Interesting choices. Definitely for you. And actually all of you. So I really enjoyed going around, each of these choices as well. So my top 3 choices are, you've hit 2 of my 3, so far. So I'll add a little bit around to some of what we talked about. My top pick was the Old Hickory Blendiculous. Blendiculous. I knew I'd say it right. So my tasting notes around the Blendiculous were it was chocolate, but bitter, not sweet, and it tasted more like a darker, chocolate around it.
Yeah.
This was a really great beer, and this is from a brewery in North Carolina. I really want to give a shout out to Best Way in Greensboro for actually pulling this bottle out for me and letting me take this beer back for us to enjoy. I would not probably have gotten this bottle any other way, and we broke actually a little bit of a rule by talking about this beer here on the show because only 480 bottles of that beer was made.
Oh, wow.
In this series. So it's really unfortunate. I hate talking about stuff that nobody can actually find or buy. But if you know somebody who can go to Alaska that can meet Julieanna behind, an Applebee's in Missouri to get a copy, to get a bottle of this, then you might have a chance of finding it. But I think most importantly, the thing that they should walk away from our comments is you're on the right track. Please make more of this. And the fact that you have really committed to more of a blending style with a lot of different aged products, it's stepping into this conversation we've had many times over about where you're stepping into aspects of winemaking and other aspects of making gouze with blended lambics, and you're doing with other styles of beers. So please, I would only encourage you to say, I look forward to tasting more of this. So my suds rating for the Blendiculous is a 4. And actually, hearing you guys rave about it, I think that's actually low. I one of the few I'd probably actually, might bump it up. But all right, so the other one you talked about was the Pretty Things. Our Finest Regards was my second choice. My tasting notes around this beer was it tasted like a smoked cola. And the flavor just kept hanging in the air is the way I would describe the flavor around this particular barley wine. And I wrote as a finishing note, me likey, because this was very good. I've never had any of these, either one of these barley wines we've talked about so far. Dave, you brought this one. Thank you very much. It was really great. It was not the first Buzzard Bay that I've had, but this is definitely one that I would come back to. And my suds rating for this is also a 4 as well. All right, so number 3, which none of you had on your list, and I have the same moment where I'm palpitating and going, oh my God, nobody talks about this. I'm the odd one out here. Was actually Straight to Ale, Blue Pants. This is a collaboration brew, Straight to Ale, Blue Pants, and Yellowhammer in northern Alabama. It's a really great brewery. We look forward to going down there. I definitely want to try their stouts that have been aged in rum and cognac barrels. I'm really looking forward to coming down and doing a show, hopefully on site in their tasting room. That would be really great. The tasting notes I had around this is it tasted like a smoked Tootsie Roll. And I don't think I've ever had a beer that I have ever written those words down. And I wrote, this would make a killer beer float. This is a concoction that I had down at Craft Brewed, where they were actually combining, ice cream with beer. I've never had a beer float before going down to Craft Brewed. And I found myself combining with a lot of stouts, through just enjoying the experience. I cannot think of a better combination, than this particular barley wine and, ice cream. I know, please, don't send any hate mail to me in advance until you try it. And then you can tell me it sucks. But I really thought this was a great barley wine all by itself. I don't think I've ever written down the word smoked Tootsie Roll ever with any beer at all. So my suds rating for this is also a 4 as well. So we got a few more minutes. There were a lot of beers that we talked about, and I know that there was definitely something at the bottom for me. I think we all had these very interesting reactions as we were tasting through this. Sometimes I really wish that we could capture the emotion of tasting on radio. And I have to say that good old boy John is probably, I can't say he's the most animated, but I enjoy watching his reaction, probably the most. Everybody enjoys what I am actually saying, which is, wow, that sucks. And then they're wondering, which one does this sucks? Which one did Mike say that? So I'm sure we had some things that were definitely fill out here of our list. I'll kick this off to get the conversation going. So I'm sorry, but the thing that hit the bottom for me, and I won't rate this, I'm just going to talk about this, was the Mikkeller. And I'm sorry, but when we were going through the beers, they were kind of in a curve, in a layout in front of us, and I leaned over to good old boy John and I said, "You're about to round the curve, man. Hang on to your taste buds."
He was not lying.
And I'm telling you, it just definitely took me in a place. My tasting notes that I wrote down around the Mikkeller were, it was like a lollipop in my mouth. It was nearly cough syrup. It was so sweet. It was definitely not anything I would think of in a barley wine. If you had told me that was a barley wine and this was a blind taste testing, I would have said, I'm sorry, but that thing is not like the other things. Please take that away. So I just didn't particularly care for it at all. What were some of the other things on the bottom of your list?
That one wasn't at the bottom, but it was one I said to myself, thank port, but in the worst sense of a bad port. Yeah.
All right, so we won't tell everybody what was the one you picked, but I will tell everybody what you said, which was, oh my God, that is.
It's great if you want to laxative.
That's it. That was what he said. Yes, we won't tell everybody which beer that was, but there was one that was.
I said it's not in the running unless you're looking for a laxative.
I don't think I'd use the word running and laxative in the same physical sentence together.
No pun intended.
I was trying to make it a little more PG. But yeah.
Julieanna, was there something at the bottom for you?
Well, I had 3 and it was a tie. A 3-way tie.
I'm looking at your notes upside down. The word "no way." This is so funny.
Well, look at wait a second. The other one. Okay, and what's interesting is that they were all 3 in a row. So, in our list,
boom, boom, boom.
I was like, yeah, the Mikkeller. I have what happened here with question marks. It's a combination of the Mikkeller, the BFM, Terrapin, Spike, and Jérôme, Cuvée, Délirante, collaboration ale. Okay, for those of you that have not tried this and that are wondering what I'm going on about this, it's a sour barley wine. Which, wrap that around your head for a minute.
In fact, that was exactly where I wrote down. A sour barley wine question mark right there. That's what I wrote down.
So, this particular one is a barley wine made with 20% rye, 80% malted barley, and it's aged in rum barrels. Okay, when I see that, I think, well, hey, this isn't bad.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, but it could be good, right? It's just too sour for a barley wine to be a barley wine to me. I mean, this is an odd version of a sour, and maybe for those sour connoisseurs out there, hey, try it. You'll probably like it. But as a barley wine,
I'll say it was in the middle of the pack in my group, and it was initially there's a medicinal character to it right off the bat that I didn't enjoy. But
the thing I like about this story is that the proximity between him tasting the Mikkeller and the BFM here, they were right back to back with each other. And so my comment was like, "You're about to round the curve." Yeah. I knew exactly which 2 beers he was about to taste, so I was watching him taste both these back to back, and I'm like, I know he's a sour beer freak. I know he'll love this. Let's see what this reaction is going to be like.
Yeah, and I didn't hate it. It was one of those beers, I think I gave it about a 3 or 2 or something, but I think I gave it a 3. And because after you get past that initial kind of shock of it being a sour barley wine and that medicinal character that kind of, fades for me, it wasn't terrible. It was not something I would drink a lot of just because it's such a unique flavor profile. But I can see where someone would be completely turned off by that beer.
Anything at the bottom for you, Dave, or Reverend Mark?
Well, and as much as I hate to say this, because if it hadn't been for this brewery, I would not have met Julieanna. But the Schlafly,
the reserve barley wine.
Yeah, the reserve barley wine.
Barrel aged.
That was
It was a bad year. Maybe that was it.
I've never had a Schlafly that I did not love. I mean, they're one of my favorite go-to breweries by all accounts. But this one was thin. I thought that they got the worst part of the flavor from the barrels because it was. They got the wood part.
Can you give me the worst barrels you got?
Yeah.
I'm thinking how this conversation goes. Yo, Jed, Can you separate the good beer from the bad beer? Not their barrel, because I'm going to take all the bad beer and we'll put it right here in this bottle. Yeah. It's going to bottle
We're going to call it Reserve Special.
Yeah. We're going to sell that to them people down there in Tennessee, because they
don't know nothing.
They don't know nothing, you know.
Give me the barrels you're going to make out of the pallets.
We just got to admit to the SEC, so we're just going to take it out on them.
They're it just tasted like old wood, that came into the flavor of the beer. And the body was very thin, so I just really felt like they missed on this one.
Anything worthy of discussion here at the bottom for you, Reverend Mark?
That was mine. It really was.
Well, we're not going to.
Let's not beat them up too much.
Yeah. So,
I'll just say may have just been a bad bottle, not even a bad vintage. Who knows?
Could be. Yeah, it could be.
So I had an offhand test with good old boy John and Reverend Mark because there were two Barleywines that we had here that were so similar with each other that I actually took them and poured them in a blind between the Old Stock 2006 and the Bigfoot 2003 that we had, because they were so close to each other. And the one thing about that particular Bigfoot, now we had two Bigfoots in this tasting. We had the barrel aged from 2013, and then we had the traditional Bigfoot from 2003. Very different, completely different beers. But the Old Stock and the Bigfoot were so close to each other, I was like, all right, it's stump the chump time between the two. So I poured them both, and you guys really, I enjoyed how you bantered back and forth and kind of reconciled about what you were tasting. So what brought you to think about what's what?
I think that the sort of the old ale flavor profile that we went over, several minutes ago was more forward in the old ale. In that old stock, and I thought this has been aged, and of course I knew the Bigfoot it was at least old in the bottle, but I just felt like there was a more of a vintage, interesting, kind of spicy but not overly malty. It was just more of a rounded beer for me.
But you guys picked the Bigfoot out of the pack, and what was the reason why that was the case?
Well, for me, I could tell that it tasted, I won't say older, but it had that like sweeter. The bitterness had kind of fallen out of the older version of that barley wine. Mm-hmm. And if you like I say, if you get a 2013 version of that beer and taste it against a 2003, it's not even going to be close, because the bitterness completely falls off in about 10, over 10 years, obviously.
Well, and I really loved the 2013 Bigfoot. I thought it was one of the better versions of Bigfoot that has come out. If I think I've probably had, Mark and I have had easily, I think, every single vintage that's come out over like a 12-year period of that beer. And I can definitely go back and think there are probably about 4 or 5, years that have really stuck out, and said, hey, this is, the 2013 definitely hit me as one of the better ones. The one you brought, the 2003, I thought was one of the other years that I really liked. The 2009 I thought was the other one in the series that I've really enjoyed back through those. And I usually don't think about vintages in terms of beer, and all. And it's not so much a matter of it's just the way that they approach that beer every single year is slightly different. And I like the fact that there are just some very subtle differences, from one year to the next. But you guys made me you helped me appreciate bringing that old stock. It was a last minute add into our conversation, and the only reason why I brought it, because I was reading through the background notes about styles, and I saw old stock in the list of commercial examples. I was like, well, I got plenty of that, and I went down and I actually had 2 or 3 vintages, and I pulled out that one just kind of out of a hat, to bring with us here. And John, your comment was dead on, because I remember when I first tasted that, I did not like it at all. In fact, it was so flat and it was so sweet. I just did not like it at all. And that's one beer that I think has taken on some good bottle conditioning, and time and age has been its friend. And even though I know our discussion is generally that time is usually not friendly, to most beers, I think in that particular case, I think it was designed for that, and I think it's holding up very well.
I think the style in general, for the most part, the style lends itself to aging. I think the American styles tend to be more drink them fresh, and but there are some, even like the Bigfoots are basically American style barley wines, but they age incredibly well. But they change; they're not the same beer 5 years from now as they would be fresh. So, if you're buying you're buying multiple vintages, you need to buy 2 bottles, drink one fresh, and age one so that you can drink it later and kind of decide what the difference is.
In fact, I think that's exactly what I did with that old stock. Yeah. I drank one and I kept the 3. It's in a 4-pack. So I think I drank one and said, wow, this is flat and crappy. I'm not drinking the rest. Threw the other 3 in the bottom of the cellar and didn't even touch it, until this week. So it was great to come back to that. Well, really enjoyed this show about barley wine. Thank you, Dave, for coming up with this idea about another style show. We'll definitely do another style show in the future. We'll have to think about something that'll be interesting for our audience. If you have a suggestion, definitely write us at sipsudsandsmokes@gmail.com, and we'll definitely enjoy all your comments that come along through our audience as well. We probably have some kind of contest in flight of some kind, and you should definitely check out our Facebook page to check out any details about what's going on with our show to help you enjoy your experience listening to our show. Definitely check out our swag shop as well. You'll definitely be able to pick up any t-shirts, hats, mouse pads, wallets, beer openers. I'm sure we'll come up with something to slap our logo on that you'll enjoy. Anyway, I want to thank my co-host for this really great show. Julieanna, thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you. Been a great time.
Good old boy Dave, thank you for joining us for this show and coming up with the show with a program idea.
Thank you, sir.
Reverend Mark, a pleasure always.
Good to be with you, mate.
I knew he was going to figure it out somehow. Good old boy Sean, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I want to thank all of our audience for listening to this show. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion about barley wine. Most of all, I'm going to ask you to join us once again and keep on sipping.
This has been a One Tan Hand production of Sips, Suds, and Smokes, a program devoted to the appreciation of some of the finer slices of life. From the Dude in the Basement Studios, your hosts, the Good Old Boys, will see you all next time.